Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. And as this airs, the 2025 session of the Kentucky General Assembly is in the books. Lawmakers cut taxes, outlawed DEI programs in higher education. They lowered the age for a driver's permit and established a film office to promote film productions in the Commonwealth. It was emotional at times when social issues were being debated, and there were moments of bipartisanship. Senate President Robert Stivers directs the legislation in the chamber where he has served since 1997 and where he has held the gavel as president of the Senate since 2013. He's a Republican from Clay County. He's joining us now. We welcome him back to Kentucky Newsmakers. Thanks for coming.
Glad to be here, Bill.
And appreciate you accommodating us. I know you had a meeting and you had to come in late in the evening. We appreciate that.
That's what happens.
In all, 1,080 pieces of legislation were proposed for consideration. It was my understanding you had asked your caucus early on to try to kind of limit the number of bills, but then the House had other ideas apparently. So a lot was introduced in that 30-day session. Was it productive in your view?
I think it was. And if you look at those 1,000 bills, I think the Senate did show a lot more restraint. I don't think we had a couple hundred, where I think close to 800 of them were in the House. But I'm going to say this. You mentioned I've been at this a long time. I think it was one of the best sessions for us from a process standpoint in communications with our fellow colleagues in the Senate, my Democrat colleagues. There was a dust-up or two, I know that. But I think it was also a good series of communications between the House leadership and the Senate leadership. And I think we got some really good things done.
But as you know, Mr. President, there were complaints about transparency, with some saying that bills were filled out late and amendments were proposed to some bills with no time to really read them and debate them. Is that a product of trying to handle too much in a session?
I think it very much is. And that's one of the reasons when we meet with our caucus before the session, people are saying, we don't have enough time to discuss this. Well, if you don't think we have enough time to get in our caucuses and discuss them, then restrain from filing so many bills. And then that way you'll have more time. And I think from that perspective, we did a really good job on managing Senate bills. But you get down to it, it's still constitutional the way we did it, but it's something that some people don't like because the method of it is so fast sometimes.
Do you consider legislation that it be important that it is the priorities of the members of your caucus, or that it is what Kentuckians may be thinking about out there? I mean, how do you decide what bills you're going to direct to the floor and what you may put in a slot somewhere?
Well, and that's in the Senate. What we will do, we meet nightly. The five people, our caucus chair, our caucus whip, the majority floor leader, the pro tem, and myself, and we go through those bills and we talk about what we've heard. Sometimes it's different being what party you're in, and sometimes it's different from what region you're in. So we try to fashion that based on what we have seen. I don't introduce a lot of bills because I have to kind of be thinking about the process more than anything, but then we'll have communications with the House, and they'll say, hey, these are priorities to us. And they'll kind of give us a list, and we'll give them the list of ours after we talk about it.
Do you think generally the priorities of the legislature reflect those of Kentucky? And I ask that given that there have been some amendments proposed here in recent years that have gone down disastrously in votes by the public.
Constitutional amendments? Yes. And yes, I do think it's reflective of what the public wants. You know, I'm not being critical of the governor, but when the people say the governor got a mandate, getting 53% of the vote when he beat Daniel Cameron, we've held almost 80% of the electorate, the votes in the Senate, and the same thing in the House. And we've gone through now cycles since 2016. If we weren't speaking on behalf of our constituents and the state of Kentucky, then you would have seen a change in the makeup of the bodies.
What was the most important thing accomplished, do you think? I know House Bill 1 was the tax cut. Would Republicans consider the session to have been successful if
we'd only done that?
If that was all that was passed?
I think so, because you look at the states that are growing and the states that are losing population, it's where you have a competitive business environment and tax code. Texas, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. Those places are growing, and we've seen an example of it. Yum, KFC, because of the tax code, their corporate headquarters are now moving from Louisville to Dallas. And so with the ability to move money so easily, people think that is one of the things they want to look at, be it international or domestic companies. They are looking for that type of tax code.
There was also a bill passed that apparently makes it easier to cut the income tax. The triggers don't go away, but they may be easier to meet in order to continue doing that. Is that the idea, to speed up the disappearance of the income tax?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But we also know it was much easier to hit our triggers, and we want to hit our triggers. And people say, well, we'll cut into the red. No, that's the way the triggers. We can never do that if we follow the triggers. But it's going to be harder as we go on. So we want to do it in smaller increments to try to get to a more competitive tax code.
Senate Bill 1 establishes a Kentucky Film Office and provides incentives. Do you believe that can be a big boost for Kentucky? It was interesting that was the Senate's top priority.
Well, that is one that I generally get the opportunity, being the president of the Senate, to call. Philip Wheeler carried it. Again, I don't do a lot of legislation because I'm thinking about the process, but the bill itself, yes, I was intricately involved in, and I think it does make a difference. I think you saw the tourism people from around the state really get behind it, because how many people think about Rocky running up the steps in Philadelphia? And people come to see places like that. It's been very successful in Georgia, and with the bad circumstances in Los Angeles, there's a lot of interest in moving out of California.
Artificial intelligence was addressed by a Senate bill that Senator Amanda Mays Bledsoe worked hard to craft. How important is it, in your view, to stay ahead of, or try at least to stay up with, the changes in AI?
I think your second language was probably better, to try. It's really hard to try to keep up with technology, Bill. It moves so fast, and to be protective of the people and understand how AI can be used. Amanda did a really good job, but this was also part of a task force that we took evidence and testimony over the interim to see how we needed to move. And there's probably every year going to have to be something different with AI.
Is an area that concerns you?
Yes. A wonderful tool, can be unbelievable. You're seeing these data centers that are circulating around places that have adequate energy, but it is going to be a huge part of our economy and the business models that people put together. And when you look at this, you'll see studies that are going to say virtually close to 8% of all domestic energy production will be devoted to AI and data.
15-year-olds can get a driver's permit under a bill passed. You're supportive?
Yes. Steve Rudy, floor leader in the House. I don't have children of that age, but it makes it a lot easier for various reasons. Kids in school needing to get that experience, students on the farm being able to work and do things like that if they meet the permit requirements and have the other people in the vehicle that are required. And it's really, people think about this, to get them that experience as a 15-year-old, it better gets them in a position to be a licensed driver when they can get the various tiered driver's licenses we have in the state of Kentucky.
Vaping will be under much stricter regulations. The same now, apparently, as tobacco and alcohol.
Yeah.
Why do we need to move in that direction?
Because so many of these things were coming in from out of the United States unregulated, and people didn't really know what the content of the little modules are and what they were vaping. And so we had to put some constraints on that, because we were hearing too many types of anecdotal situations of horror stories, but anecdote after anecdote becomes trend.
All right, let's talk about the vetoes, and there are lots of those, different priorities from the Democratic governor and the Republican legislature. First of all, it is easy to override the governor's veto in Kentucky. If you have a simple majority in each chamber, you can override. Is it too easy to override a governor's veto?
Well, to your point, we're probably one of the easiest states for a legislature to override a veto. More states are around the 60% rule instead of 50 plus 1. So we are one of the easier states to do that. I don't think it would make a difference with the numbers we have right now. With 80 in the House and 31 in the Senate, they would be overridden if we feel it appropriate. But no, I think it probably should have a little bit more scrutiny, but it's not. But that's the way our Constitution was drafted by our framers.
You could propose another amendment.
We could, but they've not been real successful lately. People like the known versus the unknown.
The anti-DEI legislation was proposed last year and it failed then and then passed this year. Does that reflect a change in the national conversation on those matters?
I think it is a trend, and individuals, and a lot of it took place because of some strained relationships in metropolitan area and some really bad policing. And I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. One of the incidents was here in Louisville. But it was an attempt to do things that people felt now were really misguided, and that you shouldn't be picking winners and losers except for what their ethnicity, their sex, their race was, that you should look at the credentials and make those irrespective of anything else.
Well, you know, that debate was very contentious.
It was.
I mean, when you referred earlier to some
dust-ups.
Tough dust-ups. There was one on the floor
yes.
there we all saw. But Democratic Senator Reggie Thomas of Lexington compared it to putting an unwelcome sign on state universities for some segments of the population. You disagree with that?
I do, and I think everybody should be welcome. And what we should do is not get in the sense that we give priority because of somebody's status, but again, they should get priority because of their accomplishments. But to that end, I think I've worked very well with Reggie and Gerald and others. For those individuals who haven't had the opportunities, we need to go out there and find out how we give people and populations that have been left behind and neglected better opportunities.
Can you do that now with this legislation? I mean, you
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and there's other things just besides education that we can do to make sure people have opportunities both in the economic and educational areas, and giving them that ability to have an upward mobility and an upward trajectory.
Another contentious debate when lawmakers decided to reverse the governor's ban by executive order on conversion therapy. That bill was amended to block gender-affirming care for prisoners held in state custody. In the end, that easily passed.
It did. And I think it had bipartisan support in both chambers. So what we feel is that you should not be doing this type of, and they say gender affirming care, is basically setting up individuals who are incarcerated, who have committed crimes, to set themselves up for a sex change. You can't get that type of medical care on your private insurance policy. So why is the state funding that? And the same thing with Medicaid and the things we did in that realm. So, we don't think it's the place for state taxpayer dollars to be used, and two, it is a better benefit than what you're seeing the private sector get.
When you sit back and hear the emotional debates like that, is it tough to hear, knowing how strongly people feel about the positions they take?
There is a lot of issues like that, Bill, that we understand, and we talked about the dust-up. You know, understand why the dust-up took place, but it's somewhat all equated.
That was the two Senate floor leaders.
Yes,
Senator Neal of the Democrats and
I wound up in the middle of it.
And the Republican leader, right, Max Wise.
But there's issues like that people feel are very close to them, very emotional. I'll give you another one that I've said has been one of the toughest things for me to deal with, was medical marijuana. All these people who felt that we needed to pass laws on medical marijuana. And do you not have sympathy and empathy for individuals who are sick from treatments of cancer? Yeah, but I just really didn't believe that they had shown me medicinal or therapeutic value in marijuana. But do I want to help them? Oh my gosh, yeah. But that's something I just haven't seen the studies that say it does. People who hold these beliefs true to them, and I'll say this about Reggie. Reggie Thomas is a true believer in that. You don't have to question where he is, and it's easy to deal with Reggie because he is that type of person. He's not an opportunist. He's a true believer. He's a crusader, and I appreciate that. And so I know it's dear to Reggie, and he has a different set of backgrounds and experiences, and that's what we bring to the Senate chamber.
All right, Senate President Robert Stivers is with us. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back in a moment. What's ahead for the remainder of this session, and then what may be ahead in another session to come? Will there be a special session given some of the changes in Washington? We're back in a moment. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We're visiting with the Senate President Robert Stivers today, who came in late to do this interview with us as the session is about to wind up and wrap up. Is it good riddance or sad when it's over?
Well, it's mixed.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't get excited about being in a legislative session, then you shouldn't be in the legislature. A lot of things go on, a lot of people there, emotions, good emotions, bad emotions. A lot of information, and I enjoy it, or I wouldn't be there. And if you don't enjoy it, plus take it seriously and understand your responsibility, you shouldn't be there.
How closely are you watching the U.S. Department of Education cuts, and do you feel it might require special legislation? The president or the administration says that there will basically be checks sent to the states. Who deals with that?
Yeah, and I don't know that I can agree with you to say there's cuts. What I understand is maybe a different method for this money to flow down from the federal level. But are we aware of it? Very, very aware of the discussion about how the Department of Education will exist, or if it will exist at all. The other component of federal action is the whole discussion around Medicaid and what they plan to do with Medicaid. And both of those combined could have an impact on us, either fiscally, which I think it can be done without a fiscal impact, but it will definitely have a process impact on us.
But those who have, raised caution flags have said, or even red flags, have complained about the fact that, they say that there is a framework from the federal government as to how money will be spent. Yeah. And if it just comes to Kentucky and block grants or whatever, again, who is going to decide where that all goes?
Well, the appropriators are the legislature. The power of the purse lies with the legislature.
So a special session likely?
I doubt it, and I'll tell you why. And I think we, as the state of Kentucky, have always punched above our weight in Washington. And right now, because of Brett Guthrie, the congressman in the 2nd District, I think they're very well aware in his 10 years of service in the state Senate that whatever they do, it will have a deferred implementation. Like, they're not going to pass and say, all right, starting July 1 of 25. They'll say like July 1 of 26, that will allow legislatures to understand what it is and then come in their regular cycle and then adapt to it.
There was also passed a bill that will give some guidance to, the Council on Post-Secondary Education as to how these universities can start doctoral programs. As you know, EKU is eager to start a osteopathic medical college there. Is that likely to give them a path to that?
I think it is. And really, that's the way the process was perceived and conceived in 1997 when Paul Patton called us into special session. Let the process of the Council of Post-Secondary Education be the coordinating body. Put the evidence in front of them and let them investigate to see if the program, one, is needed, and two, are there the resources at the university to provide the necessary types of facilities and staffing and faculty to do that program.
There is some concern, K through 12, that we're in a situation again where the rich districts are doing well and the poorer districts are struggling, and school districts can't seem to pass those nickel taxes sometimes to do projects or to improve their facilities. Is there a remedy for that in the works?
Well, we always have to reevaluate any type of funding mechanism because the environment, the taxes, everything else change in the way where people live. In our area, there's been a pretty good out-migration of population due to the loss of jobs related to the coal industry. So how those counties have been impacted, we have to look at that, and there may be necessary adjustments out there. But I don't believe it's now we're at that point, but it's something that as we go into the future, we're going to have to monitor.
Are you leaving Frankfort feeling pretty good about what has been done in these weeks that have made up the 30-day session?
Yeah, for a short session, the bills, there weren't too many bills filed. I'll agree with that. But the bills that we prioritized, I think they will have significant impact on the state of Kentucky.
President Stivers, thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Glad to.
We'll be back in a moment. We'll wrap up Kentucky Newsmakers right here. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers, and a couple of important stories before we go. President Donald Trump is inching closer to fulfilling his campaign promise of dismantling the U.S. Department of Education, although it would require congressional action eventually. Last week, the Office of Civil Rights learned that several of their regional offices were shutting down. Our Investigates team has been looking into the status of active cases here in Kentucky. And Kelsey Soto has the story of two parents who are worried their claims will be forgotten.
Well, last week, nearly half of the Department of Education's 4,000 employees learned that they would be losing their jobs, several hundred of them coming from the Office of Civil Rights. And they're in charge of investigating allegations of discrimination based on race, gender, disability, and even religion against school districts and colleges. And every year, they get thousands of complaints nationwide. And now they'll have to do it with even fewer staff.
We're going to be returning education very simply back to the states where it belongs.
President Donald Trump has vowed to do away with the Department of Education. Last week, he signed an executive order to restructure. Mass layoffs were announced, eliminating 50% of their workforce, like Brittany Coleman, who worked at the Office of Civil Rights.
Concern after concern that, with what we're seeing by just shoveling this work off to other regional offices that are already short-staffed anyway throughout OCR, that it means that students aren't going to get the help that they need in a timely manner, and that it can cause lasting effects because we're not able to intervene in time.
Brianna Burns and Shannon Booker are both mothers to students in Rowan County. The two have open and pending investigations with OCR based out of Philly. Well, they did. 7 of the 12 regional offices were closed last week, including the Philadelphia location, which served Kentucky. Parents fear these cases may fall through the cracks.
We're aware that the school was contacted, that the allegations were made, that the cases were open. Information was requested from them, documentation of what they had done, and then to now be met with the doors were closed. I feel a little bit nervous again.
OCR is tasked with investigating claims of discrimination based on race, sex, religion, and disability. If the office finds evidence of discrimination, they can force a school district or college to change policies and direct them to provide services to students. Sometimes OCR even monitors schools to make sure they comply.
You have to have an effective mechanism in play. If you want to uphold the rights of students, of people in general, there has to be an effective mechanism in play and somebody willing to uphold it.
In Rihanna's case, one of the claims had already reached a voluntary resolution. Some of those reporting requirements list deadlines later this month. But with no oversight, she worries those changes won't come.
And it scares me to think that nobody cares, that so many kids are left unprotected right now.
The NAACP and the National Education Association, as well as some parents, have filed a lawsuit seeking a court order to stop the dismantling of the DOE. Agency officials have said that the work of the Office of Civil Rights will continue. However, the two women I talked with say neither one has been contacted by another regional representative to give an update on their case. Bill?
Kelsey Soto keeping watch on that for us. Thank you. Well, history on the bench. Justice Pamela Goodwine is the only woman in Kentucky to have served at every level in the state's judicial system. In November, she was elected as the first black female Supreme Court justice to serve here in Kentucky. And this Women's History Month, WKYT's Lucy Cole takes us through the journey and legacy of Justice Goodwine.
Important case information. a statue she's had for decades.
The woman on the move, it just reminded me of me.
And photos facing toward her, not away from her.
I'll look up and I'll see my mother-in-law and I'll just stop and reflect.
Those are the decorations on the historic desk of Kentucky's first black female Supreme Court Justice, Pamela Goodwine.
Fulfilling a 45-year dream. Talk about a phenomenal feeling.
On the heels of her father's cancer diagnosis, she came to Lexington as a court reporter, forfeiting college scholarships to take care of her father.
I was here 6 months when my mother was murdered. So that, shortly after my father's death, one thing after another.
Grief consumed her, but one dream never left her mind.
I mean, I just boldly looked at them and said, I want to be a justice on the Kentucky Supreme Court. And they just looked at me like,
she's made history before on the district bench, crediting her mother's murder trial for lessons she'd take with her.
The experiences that I believe that I can bring to the position now, thinking about how decisions affect not only the person standing before me, but also their families.
In November of 2024, the ultimate dream, a title switch from judge to justice, something that was only a dream when she came to the city the fall after her father died.
When I think about how I felt that November day, to how I felt in November of 2024, I was in awe.
A recent upgrade sporting her new title was made to her office door. For Justice Goodwine, seeing it makes it real, a reminder of her father.
I just kept seeing my daddy's face and his teaching that there are no excuses. People say, now what? Now what are you going to do? My dream now, again, is to just be and continue to be the best that I can be.
And that was WKYT's Lucy Cole reporting and continuing a series of significant contributions made by Lexington women. You can see her stories on demand anytime at WKYT.com. And the fact that Court Justice Goodwine is serving right now has also set a milestone. It is the first majority female state Supreme Court in Kentucky history. Well, that's Kentucky Newsmakers. We thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you make it a good week ahead.